You're watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Samia Sayed. Welcome to the show. Coming up, we have an interview with Sister Shireen Ahmed, a sports journalist and senior contributor with the CBC, over World Hijab Day and France's recent effort to ban the hijab from sports. But first, let's go over the headlines. Sitting Tories to decide Erin O'Toole's fate on Wednesday. Rapid hate hotline set up in Ottawa amid truck driver protests. NDP Andrea Horwath urges support for Our London Family Act. Muslims celebrate World Hijab Day. And now the details. A division within the Conservative Party of Canada may oust leader Erin O'Toole. So far, 35 votes have been submitted to the Conservative caucus chair, MP Scott Reid, enough to initiate a leadership review. If a vote exceeds 60 signatures out of 119, an interim leader will replace O'Toole. O'Toole stated on a Facebook post last night that he has no plans of stepping down. Anti-O'Toole rhetoric has gained momentum since the Conservative Party lost 2 seats in the 2021 election. Ottawa will establish a hotline to report hate incidents related to the truckers' protest, announced Police Chief Peter Slowly yesterday. The protest extends into its 5th day today, with the police receiving reports of harassment and intimidation. Slowly says incidents of racism, hate, and anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. Calling themselves the Freedom Convoy, the protesters are pushing against the mandate requiring them to be fully vaccinated. As of now, the police are negotiating with the protest organizers. On the 5th anniversary of the Quebec City mosque shooting, there were calls for support of Our London Family Act in Ontario by NDP leader Andrea Horwath and prominent Muslim leaders. Horwath at London Muslim Mosque on Saturday urged Premier Doug Ford to pass the legislation before the spring election. She said that no one should be afraid of visiting a mosque or wearing a hijab in Canada. Ontario Liberal Party leader Stephen Del Duca and Green Party leader Mike Schreiner also support the bill. The act was proposed after an attack in June left 4 Muslims dead in London, Ontario. World Hijab Day was celebrated across the world today to address the significance of and reaffirm a Muslim woman's right to wear a headscarf. New Yorker Nazma Khan founded the day in 2013 to foster religious tolerance and understanding between different faiths and communities. The event was celebrated in several countries, including Indonesia, Bangladesh, Turkey, and Canada. Attendees, Muslim and non-Muslim, were invited to learn about the significance of the hijab and invited to try one on themselves. Meanwhile, activists in India decry the state's effort to ban hijab-wearing Muslim students from entering the classroom. That's it for the news. Every year on February 1st, World Hijab Day recognizes the millions of Muslim women who choose to wear a hijab. The day aims to foster religious tolerance and understanding by inviting all women to experience the hijab for just one day. To speak to us in light of World Hijab Day is Sister Shireen Ahmed. Shireen Ahmed is a sports journalist and activist who focuses on the intersections of racism and misogyny in sports. She is an industry expert on Muslim women in sports and a senior contributor with CBC. Welcome, Sister Shireen. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Samia.
Sister Shireen, as I mentioned, we are having this interview not only for World Hijab Day, but also to cover a recent motion by France's Senate to ban wearing the hijab while playing sports. Can you tell us about this ban? How does it affect Muslims in France?
Well, first of all, Muslim women have been targeted in France for choosing to wear hijab or niqab, which has been effectively banned. And this iteration of movement to propose law, which was fortunately not passed yesterday by the second chamber of the Senate, has not gone away. So what's happened at this point is that this proposed ban would exclude Muslim women and girls who choose to wear hijab from sports at any level. This doesn't mean only recreationally, it doesn't mean only in gyms, but it would also impact younger girls in school who wouldn't then be able to complete their physical education curriculum. So there's many levels of this. This is an incredibly intricate bill that would affect Muslim women and girls at virtually every level of life in France. So it's incredibly problematic.
Mm-hmm. And what was the reasoning for proposing such a bill?
Well, aside from the, institutionalized xenophobia and anti-Muslim sentiment that is prevalent in France, it essentially argues that Muslim women wearing hijab doesn't afford an equality amongst athletes or people in that space. So it's saying that identifiably being Muslim, it goes against the principle of secularism that France believes in. Now, we all know this to be hypocrisy because there's crucifixes and crosses in every place. And moreover, French athletes who are Christian, even or who are Christian playing in leagues in that country, actually do the sign of the cross before they go on the court, before they go on the soccer pitch. So it's incredibly, one-minded to do it specifically against Muslim women.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that the legislation was not passed in the vote yesterday. Does that mean it can be passed sometime in the future?
Yeah, French people are relentless with their hatred for Muslim women and their disdain. So I do not see this going away soon. But what we have seen is an incredible turn on social media. And I think it's important for people to understand that dissemination of information doesn't only come through journalists, it can come through social media as well. And, individual sharing and opposing this happening in France, because no country wants to be the target of ire for many people. So TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, even Twitter, people are sharing with a hashtag, let us play, which is really important here because it's saying that this is an issue, although it's specific to France in this way, it affects perceptions of Muslim women all over the world.
Mm-hmm. And I believe France already has a ban in effect for Muslim women wearing hijab in public spaces. Is not being able to wear a hijab in sports so much more different?
Absolutely. It's a purposeful exclusion of Muslim women in these spaces. It's rooted in misogyny and it's rooted in xenophobia. And I think that when you take away the choice of a woman, you take away her choice to wear hijab, to practice her spirituality in a way that she's comfortable with, that's against the tenets of freedom of expression, of spiritual practice. And I think for a country that considers itself mighty in terms of liberty, equality, and fraternity, this is diametrically opposed to that.
Mm-hmm. And it is only hijab that is being targeted by this legislation, nothing else?
Well, that's a great question, Samia. And the reason is that on previous hijab bans, which is where my expertise lies in sports,
Mm-hmm.
so it wasn't only hijab, it was turbans and then kippah for Jewish men. But
Yeah.
this particular law does single out Muslim women. And I think this is something that we cannot overlook, that the very intentional targeting of Muslim women is dangerous. And it literally is fracturing communities because how are young girls supposed to play and engage in wider society? And sports is definitely a way to do this. I do want to point out that although a hijab ban from FIFA was lifted in 2014, France is the only country in the world that refused to observe the permissibility of hijab in football and soccer. So France is still a place that doesn't welcome women with hijab as players, coaches, officials, or staff.
Mm-hmm. Now, the French government voted against the amendment or legislation themselves, yet last year they passed legislation to strengthen the ban on hijab for public spaces and gatherings. What is happening here? There seems to be an inconsistency between strengthening hijab bans last year and then not voting against it this year.
So, and I think we have to be careful and a little bit more specific when we say the French government. So, although Emmanuel Macron, who is the president of France, opposed the specific bill, there is a wider sentiment of anti-Muslim, propaganda in France. And this particular bill and ban on hijab in sports was not supported by the center and the left parties. So when we say it wasn't the French government per se that did it, it was specific parties like the right-wing party, Les Républicains. They're the ones who introduced the bill. So I think we need to be aware of who's sitting at what position. And you're right to point out that there is inconsistency because nowhere is the center and the left fully saying that hijab is welcome. That message is not being given. They're just saying that this level in sport, we're not going to make it that much more difficult yet.
Mm-hmm. There's also talk about the Paris 2024 Olympics that could be affected by this ban if it is chosen to be put in place in the future. What does that look like for the Olympics then?
Well, I ran into this issue when France was hosting the Women's World Cup in 2019, because France itself does not permit women in hijab to participate in football in that country. So the Fédération de Football Française doesn't allow that. However, it is FIFA that's hosting the tournament, that hosted the tournament, not France in itself. So what I assume would happen, and this is conjecture at this point, I haven't had confirmation or word from the IOC, but nor has a statement been made on this. But the rules of the International Olympic Committee may supersede the rules of the host country. So if there are, and there are, mashallah, athletes from around the world in weightlifting and rowing, in judo and karate and in archery, all over the place, that do wear hijab. So how would that affect them? And in no way would the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, want to be seen as upholding something that goes against the charter of values that protects athletes to engage safely in sport. So I do feel the IOC, if this ban is passed, should act very swiftly. And in my opinion, and it's something I stated in a column I wrote for CBC last week, is that they should strip France of hosting these games.
We see here in Quebec that they seem to follow in France's footsteps almost with Bill 21 and banning religious symbols in public. Should we be concerned as Canadians about the hijab also being banned and that being a possibility for Quebec?
Yeah, I mean, Bill 21 has already done that. That there's mirroring of sentiment in France, definitely within Quebec society. And it's not as if any other provinces or Canada are immune to this anti-Muslim sentiment. We had a terrorist attack on a family in June. So, I mean, in London, Ontario. So it's not to say that this is only restricted to Quebec. I think Canadians generally should be very alarmed by this. And, Bill 21 is absolutely against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to practice. And you see the effect on society. We see the effect in the emotional and psychological toil it takes on people who live in Canada. And I think that's completely unfair. And it's unjust and something that Canadians should really start paying attention to.
Well, thank you so much, Sister Shireen, for coming here for this short but brief interview. Very insightful information that you've given us here about this ban in in France, and even the possibility for Canadians. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. That's it from our Toronto studios tonight. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more Canadian Muslim content. Stay safe, and until next time.